David Graeber, I think he was the one who wrote the book Bullshit Jobs, which, by the way, I've also written about before him. I want credit. Give me credit. I want credit. Anyway, so he tweeted all the publishers that he knows blame Jeff Bezos and Amazon for the destruction of the book industry. And someone who has had a book published by a major publisher and has dealt with a bunch of different publishers on the way to doing that, it's much more complicated than just blaming Amazon. First, nobody reads. I found a whole bunch of stats that I'm not going to get into, but leisure time reading has plummeted. And what that did was make publishing a shrinking industry. They have consolidation. They shed a lot of jobs, a lot of companies go out of business, other competitors go in and they take share, they hire some of the best people. You're left with this shrunken shell of a former industry. And secondly, publishers, they're stuck in some sort of legendary status that they don't have anymore. They have a lore of greatness. That lore is now crippling them. If I told you about some of the insane conversations I had, I'll tell you about one. There was a woman that I was introduced to. I guess she was a VP at some big publisher at the time. We got on the phone and her first question was, well, how did we get introduced? So I told her who the person was. And she's like, well, this is so unusual because normally I get introduced through an agent and then she started lecturing me about the process. And I looked at the time, we were 10 minutes into our phone call. She was consumed with how the process is supposed to work. And at some point I just said, well, we're on the phone now. Maybe we should talk about the book a little bit. She did not care about the actual content. She cared more about the process. My brain melted and oozed out of my ears. I just couldn't believe someone that senior can function in this way. It told me everything I needed to know about this business. Digital was their extinction event, not Amazon. This transition to ebooks and user experience and new business models and the death of exclusivity and of gatekeepers who get to decide what gets published and what doesn't, and all these new marketing channels and tools, they were prepared for exactly 0% of this. They just didn't have the vision for this market. They didn't have the skills. So to think that this corporate paraplegic can rush into battle and defeat, the monster that is Amazon is insanity to me. It's insanity. And to blame Amazon is a lazy way to think about this. Authors, they were just as complicit in this. When anyone can publish, and there are countless new modes of consumption, you got to raise your game. Just because you're an author and you wrote something, that doesn't entitle you to getting published, doesn't entitle you to getting your voice heard, doesn't entitle you to making money. It just doesn't. And unless you raise your game to the level that others are doing it or adopt some of these new technologies and marketing techniques, you're screwed. And you're dealing with a shrinking business and shrinking amount of consumption time and more people publishing because the tools are readily available. The competition level is through the roof. So you better be interesting. You better be more interesting than now. Instead of 100 people that are submitting book proposals, 100,000 people that could just type one up and self-publish. And finally, when they realized they were losing power, the publishers sued. They sued Amazon. And Amazon did some shady things, so I don't want to pretend like they didn't. But that's what uncreative incumbents do. They follow this well-worn path. It's the same path that Kodak took and Blockbuster took. And they're essentially, realizing that they're tumbling downward and they're just trying to grasp to, little rocks and things that could keep them from, hitting the bottom of the trench. And authors have to keep up. And maybe you're not an author anymore. Maybe you need to think of yourself as a creator of some kind and find ways of telling stories that people actually want. And same thing happened with bookstores. If you sell a commodity like a book, that's readily available online and also downloadable online with zero waiting time, you better raise your game. And, I tweeted this before COVID, but even now, this is going to come around. People are going to want to get out and participate in life again. They're not going to be locked up forever. So hosting book clubs, author readings, experiences for kids, literary debates and competitions, debate championships with betting. You could have cosplay costume competitions of your favorite literary characters. You can have movie versus book night where you screen a movie and then people debate which was better, the movie or the book. Monthly subscription book club. Promote customers' work. Have readings of their work and feature them in your bookstore. I could do this all day. I can make hundreds of these ideas, hundreds. And to not adopt any of them and then point to Amazon and say, oh, they're taking our business, you are lazy. I'm sorry, you are lazy. And yes, sometimes it hits you hard, but that's when you have to get creative or shut down, regroup, and come back as something else, something that people actually want. And yes, you should fight back against predatory companies, but at some point, you also have to innovate. You just have to. Markets change, they always do. And there are ways to do it better. It's funny, we were talking about books. Barnes & Noble in 1995, when Windows came out, was a place people could go for tech support with Windows 95. And if you had Windows 95, you needed tech support. You needed more tech support than anyone in the history of the world has ever needed. More tech support than RoboCop, more tech support than the Terminator. I'm talking about insane amounts because that thing would crash every 5 seconds. But I actually think they were onto something. I still think there is a huge opportunity for a digital support center because technology is getting more pervasive and more complex. A lot of people are getting older. Some people are just not wired for it. And there's just this big unmet need for people to learn how to use everyday technology. Some sort of helpline, in-home servicing, and at some point after COVID, retail locations. Geek Squad that kind of did some of that, which was acquired by Best Buy. You have the Apple Store and Genius Bar, but really they're in the business of selling you new stuff. They're in the business of you showing them a device, they look it over, try to turn it on, and go, oh no, you need a new one. Well, I do think there is room for an entity that cares, and Barnes & Noble, ironically, was onto it, but these are different times, I guess.